Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Glue Guys. We are so excited to be doing this, and we hope you enjoy listening as much as we enjoy making it. We named this podcast Glue Guys because we are inspired by people who are great teammates and who make their teams win. Generally, each episode is going to tackle a theme. We're going to kick off with leadership, sharing the stories of great coaches we've all been lucky enough to have. We'll talk about the seriousness and sometimes the silliness that is part of leading others to victory. The other two episodes in the feed are going to focus on our teammates and on communication. And you can expect conversations about resilience, mindset, relentlessness, and some amazing guests over the coming weeks. We hope you enjoy our first episode of Glue Guys.
Glue Guys is proud to have Ramp as the first presenting sponsor of the podcast. I was shocked to learn that most financial teams spend 80% of their time doing operational work and only 20% of their time doing strategic work. Ramp flips that equation. This financial operations platform simplifies everything about how businesses spend money and spend their time. With Ramp, you can manage spend approvals, control your expenses, automate your accounting, track your vendor relationships, and even book your travel. Ramp enables finance teams to focus all of their attention on what's most important. It allows companies to issue physical and virtual cards to every employee with spend limits, category restrictions, and automated compliance checks to ensure spend outside of expense policy is never allowed to happen. Ramp eliminates both manual expense reports for employees and removes the need for accountants to spend hundreds of manual hours each month classifying transactions so financials are accurate. The Ramp team is all in on saving their customers time and money. Ramp is used by best-in-class businesses like Shopify, Airbnb, Anduril, and many more. They all use Ramp to manage their spend and automate away tedious financial processes that just distract from the main thing. Ramp is easy to use. Get started now and build a more efficient team and a more profitable business, whether you have 5 employees or 25,000. Go to ramp.com/GG to sign up for free and get a $250 welcome bonus. That's ramp.com/GG.
All right, Glue Guy listeners, let's talk about something that might just change the way you sleep forever. 8 Sleep. You've probably heard of the pod, right? I mean, if it's good enough for Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, it's probably worth checking out for yourself. But they've just upped their game with the Pod 4 Ultra, the new gold standard in intelligent sleep systems. Now, here's the deal. The Pod 4 Ultra is like having a climate-controlled assistant in your bed. No, not like that, you freaks, but it is simple. You just add it to your current mattress like a fitted sheet and boom, it automatically cools or warms each side of your bed. So no more battles over the thermostat with your partner, no more blanket tug of war. It's all been settled. It's been clinically proven to give you up to an hour more quality of sleep every night, which, I mean, who couldn't use that? The standout feature here is the cooling capability. This thing can cool your side of the bed to 20 degrees below room temperature. Perfect for those hot summer nights. Now imagine setting your bed to a perfect 55 degrees while you're in a deep sleep, all managed by the Pod's autopilot feature, which adjusts the temperature throughout the night. So you get a deeper, more restorative sleep even without thinking about it. Unbelievable. Now, I took over 1,000 naps over the course of my 13-year NBA career. I played well over 1,000 games, and Michael Lewis once called me the no stats all-star. Now, if I had 8 sleep during my career, I would have been the stats all-star. Seriously. Sleep is the new Rolex, it's the new Mercedes, it's the new luxury brand. So why wouldn't you want the best sleep money can buy, the best sleep possible? Now, the best part, you can add the Pod 4 Ultra to any bed, whether you're just an athlete trying to optimize recovery or someone looking to improve your quality of life. So right now, you can get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra at 8sleep.com/Glue Guys. Just use the code Glue Guys. Level up your sleep and thank me later.
We're talking about what makes a great coach today.
Great players. Yeah, exactly. No lie. Like this is, it was like so illuminating. I've had, we can get into the coaches I played for, but an embarrassment of Hall of Fame coaches. All right. And maybe the most sage that I learned from was actually, the walking encyclopedia of basketball, Hubie Brown. Okay, he came in, took over a Memphis Grizzlies team that won 23 games the year before and transformed us into a playoff team. And so Hubie, for those who don't follow basketball, has forgotten more about basketball than all of us know combined. I mean, the guy is he's still on TV. He's 90 years old and it's rocking and rolling. He's like a grandpa to me. He's the closest thing that I ever had to a grandpa. And his little nuggets of wisdom were unbelievable. And probably the greatest clinician in the game of basketball the world has ever seen. So people would come around the world to hear Hubie talk and draw plays and just learn, from the Yoda of basketball. And he started every clinic with the same lesson. All right. So he'd be at the chalkboard or the overhead projector and he'd walk up there and he's from, Jersey City. So he got a gravelly voice, a raspy New York Jersey accent. He said, y'all, I'm going to teach you the most important lesson that I can ever teach you about basketball. And so all the coaches are like, oh my gosh, the first thing, okay, write this down. So all the coaches, and he goes to the chalkboard and Hubie says, if you do not have good players, you will not win. He said, stay with me. I'm going to say it again. The most important thing I'll say today is if you do not have good players, you will not win. And I can teach you everything I know about basketball, every play, every situation. But if you don't have the horses to go out and execute, it doesn't matter. And so never forget that. So I never heard a coach ever say that in all the years I played basketball. And so, it made me feel good as a player. But, it shines a light on like one of the common themes between all my Hall of Fame coaches. Huge egos, but huge humility as well. To always know that it was collaborative.
Don't you think there's some psychology there?
Totally, dude. I was literally thinking the same thing, Alex.
Flipping the accountability back to the players, right? Like as the coach, or like, I don't know, or challenging the players even a little psychologically. Oh, yeah. Like, listen, we can drop the greatest plays, but unless you guys, go make this happen. And that's why I think, this whole, obviously there's so many things that go into making a great coach. And no doubt, like, I think the amazing thing about sports is more often than not, Shane, you tell me wrong, like every team's got great players, right? Like every team's got amazingly talented guys, football, no different. Like the parity is like unbelievable week to week. And so I actually think it makes the coaching, like that's the difference maker a lot of times at the NFL side, right? Like, especially because they have so much input in the week to week game plans, the chess match, the psychology of your team when they take the field, especially only like once a week. And certainly all the great coaches I've played for have been like master psychologists, I think.
But one thing that's cool about that too, though, is I like it's the psychologist, but it's also, like you said, Shane, it makes you feel good as a player, which is like this guy knows that it's about us, right? But he's also creating more accountability, right, in that moment. And then he also makes it attractive if you're a good player to go play for him because you're like, oh, Hubie understands that, the players have got to do this. And I think what it attracts is like maybe the best coaches are also good recruiters at some level of like, okay, these people want to come. I get good people that want to come be a part of this,
100%. You could spend the rest of your life reading leadership books, right? And all the different styles and just any walk of life. Right. There have been people that have distinguished themselves as people who can get a group of other people to follow in on a common mission and accomplish something of note. Right. And that's really the basic tenets of leadership. And it's something everyone is searching for. And I do a lot of corporate speaking. And, it's funny that what I always lead off with is that we are a leadership starved world. Okay. So, Google knows what the pulse of the world is, right? Because they know what we're searching for. And, ever since they started out, they have what's called the Google score. And they assign a letter that's, on a scale of 1 to 100 of how popular that term is for any given period. And the term leadership, since the start of this Google algorithm tracking scale, all right, has never been lower than like a 90.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, if you look at other words, it may go up and down, Kelly Clarkson, well, you name it, whatever.
Shane's showing his age here, Alex.
Yeah, exactly.
Reference,
Exactly. In and out of our consciousness. All right. But the one thing that we are obsessed about is leadership. Do we have it? What's it look like? How do I get it? How do I keep it? Is this person who I'm following like the person I really want to follow? Right? What are the alternatives? And so, consequently, I also talk about the term teammateship. All right. The word teammate has less than a 1 Google score.
Really?
Yeah. It's never had more than a 1 Google value in the scale. While, leadership is around 90, teammate is 1. So,
wow.
So that shows you how obsessed we are about coaches and leaders, and who's leading the pack here. And I find that like a mind-blowing statistic.
With this on the pro sports side, that really makes it unique, right? Like you could be a founder of a business and you're flying under the radar, right? And no one even knows about you, and you can take years. Every company's on its own timeline, right? Like some blow up fast, some can take 5-10 years. The James Dyson 14 years he takes to finally build that thing, right? You don't get that in team sports. No owner's giving a guy 14 years to just, I don't care how resilient you are and gritty, like you're just not getting it, right? Like you have to, it's a win now deal. And so I think all of that combined, can you get it done? And I think there's so many parallels that we can take from some of these great team sport pro coaches that can like translate to all of our lives on so many levels. And like, there's still things that I carry with me. I find as a parent that I'm using these quotes, like I'm using Jim Harbaugh'isms on my son, like I use it. Andy Reid, like on the NFL side, the one thing that really, I think is really interesting, and we talk about it every single year, like at the end of the year when they call it, what is it, Black Monday, when all the head coaches get fired. Right. And there's always 5 to 7 of them, and you got all these job openings, and it's who's going to get hired in. It's always the cream of the crop as far as like who's the hottest offensive and defensive coordinators. But that candidate pool, right? Like what it takes to be a great offensive and defensive coordinator has nothing to do with what it takes to be a great head coach. Absolutely nothing. Like the things we're going to talk about that make great head coaches, it has very little to do with like how gifted of an X's and O's guy you were as an offensive coordinator or a D coordinator, right? Like that's not what it takes. The criteria for both aren't even close to the same thing. And there is no, on the NFL side, like there's no great evaluator for the future great head coaches. Like Dan Campbell sits and has been sitting there interviewing for head coaching jobs and can't get one because he looks like, he's this big, giant, strong, goober that like he never was a coordinator, so nobody hires him. And finally the Detroit Lions like recognize, and take a chance on him and look at him like this guy's absolutely a bona fide, like phenomenal head coach.
Thankfully, my Lions,
yes,
realize they need a leader, someone to inspire them. So like what you just described, Alex, is what Ravi does every single day, right? And so love to hear your perspective about, you are coming across the most talented founders who have an unbelievable idea. And as good as those ideas are, like you're worried about, can the people who, work under this person, will they follow her? Will they follow him? Right? I mean, that's the exact same thing. It does a great offensive coordinator, does a great defensive coordinator, make a great head coach, make a great leader.
Yeah, I mean, like what you guys just said. So I'm just like writing things down. The beginning of like this tension of huge ego but huge humility. Pretty interesting. Like we definitely got to go into that. The psychologist, huge thing. And then the difference of like being technically sound versus actually being somebody that can lead. Like this is all good shit. And I that is exactly what I was thinking about, like for the founder analogy. So it's interesting. So I actually go back to a sports analogy when I think about founders, which is this story that Shane, I'm sure you and I have talked about. I don't know, Alex, you and I have talked about, but apparently Kobe, when he was alive, he wasn't yet a captain, but he came back after a summer and went to Phil Jackson and said, "Hey, I worked out all summer. I'm playing the best basketball of my life. I'm ready to be a captain. I'm ready to lead." And apparently Phil Jackson immediately said back without missing a beat, "But nobody wants to follow you." And it was just like such an incredible response, right? Of like, you don't make yourself the leader. The people make you the leader. Like people wanting to follow you makes you the leader. So you go back to the founder thing, Shane, right? If you're thinking about like what can make somebody a good coach or leader, one thing is they have to have an idea that's worth chasing. Like that is table stakes. They have to have some vision for the world, some place that they're going that is inspirational for people that are really good. They got to have that. And if they don't have that, we can't do it. But in addition to that, they have to be able to attract people that, frankly, like it's almost irrational for them to go and chase them. You know what I'm saying? Because the people that they need have tons of other options and they're never like looking for jobs. Think about it. In our world, it's interesting, right? Like anybody who's any good is probably recognized at the place they're working at and they're probably treated pretty well. So all of a sudden, they got to make an irrational decision to go and follow somebody who's unknown and based on an idea. Well, how do they get them to follow them? They have to be super compelling. They have to be super inspiring. They have to earn it in some way. And so the way it's interesting, some of them earn it in different ways. You know, like there are some people that earn the followership in the tech world through just straight like substance. Like I mean substance on like content. Like they know something, they can go toe to toe on the topic with the best people. And so I'm thinking of someone like Patrick Collison at Stripe. Like he's just so smart that people really feel like they learn and he can engage quickly on pretty much anything. But then you take somebody else like Brian Chesky at Airbnb. Brian Chesky is amazing, right? But he's actually just an incredible, like, in addition to being really smart, an incredible storyteller and incredibly inspirational in the moment. Like he sits down with people the first day when they join an Airbnb and be like, if you died in a year, would this be the way you'd want to spend the next year or the last year of your life? I mean, that's like a pretty bold question to ask somebody. And the answer for most people on most things is like, fuck no, man, I got to go and do X, Y, and Z. But he like sets the bar really high. So I guess for me, when I think about it, for what you just said, Shane, I am a lot of times when I'm looking at a founder, I just try to ask myself, would I want to go work for them? Not that I'm a perfect example, but would I do something crazy and go work for them? Because that to me is the evidence of like what I call my best friend and be like, you got to go do this, right? Because if you're not willing to do that, then it's actually hard to believe that they're going to be able to recruit great people.
Do you guys think, Shane, tell me if you're wrong, like I feel like every great head coach I've been around, the team very much takes on their personality. And I think this, Ravi, that's probably the same on the business side as well.
For sure.
Like the things I've read, about Steve Jobs and, Bezos and stuff like that. But, and I do.
Well, just to interrupt you, did you think about it like this for Apple? You're so right. Because Apple is ambitious, ferocious, and meticulous, right? That's Jobs. It is him. Like it is perfectly him.
Andy Reid, no doubt, like the number one thing he says, like fear nothing, attack everything. That's like his number one slogan. And I think within that though, Andy, and I don't know if I don't know if this shines through the media and if people think this, but like Andy, like has this phenomenal sense of humor. And he like loves being around the guys and cracking jokes and giving nicknames and like making fun of people and making fun of himself. And that shines through in his players. Like, I think the reason you see like Patrick and Kelsey like smiling while they play on the field is because like Andy is. Like you come over at a TV timeout and Andy's going to crack a joke during a TV timeout, like on the sideline when, everybody's nervous and, tightened up and Andy's over there like in a big moment and he's going to crack a joke.
Is it an off-color joke or like a appropriate joke? Can you share this with our listeners?
He'd be a little bit of everything. Yeah, like he'd tell you to not be don't be scared. And he would like always his favorite one is like we'd be talking about plays. Hey, it's 3rd and 3. What are we going to do? We're like coordinators talking about the 4 plays that we might run, and everybody's kind of like voicing their opinion. And Andy would like just tap you on the arm and be like, "Hey, when in doubt, go deep." Like that's like he would just like in the middle of you're like, come on, man, like I'm trying to run a play here, and he just like I think that all feeds through, right? And he constantly talks about letting your personality show, right? And I think those things like you watch the Chiefs play, like, and they got personality, right? They and he lets them do that. That's just and it's a different style, right? That's different than the Patriot way, like very different, where it's like they want the machine. And it was no different again for like Harbaugh, Urban, like those teams very much embodied those personalities. Like the one I love too, a quick story here, like Jim Harbaugh in the sports world. I don't know if it's the same in basketball, Shane. Like when you would travel, you had to dress up in suits, right? Like that was like, and it would always be like the thing everybody said is like, it's a business trip. Hey, it's this business trip, right? And I I always thought that was funny. Like, I'm like, we play football, right? And especially in San Francisco, there's a lot of travel because there's only so many teams like west of the Mississippi. And so it's a lot of miles. A lot of times you're leaving 2 days before. You only play once a week. You've got literally some of the biggest human beings on the planet, guys, 6'7", 350 pounds. Hey, and we're going to go on a 5-hour plane flight. Let's stick this guy in a suit, right? Like it just made no sense. And so Jim totally did banish that rule. It's like, this is stupid. Like this is, and I don't think, and he doesn't think of himself like that. I mean, this guy played for 15 years. So he went in this whole spiel. He bought every single guy on the team a blue collar shirt. So literally a blue collar shirt. And I didn't even know the history of the whole white collar, blue collar thing. So this was like a mechanic shirt, like a short sleeve mechanic shirt, pocket, and it had a patch.
That's awesome.
Pocket, and he got everybody's name done, and so every single person on the team had their blue collar shirt, and it's also because like that's what Jim is, right? Jim's blue collar, and he wanted his team to be like that kind of mindset. And so that's what we traveled in, and it was amazing. Jeans and a blue collar shirt, and like it was so nice to like.
That's so good. That's so good.
It was such like a little stupid thing, but it actually like I liked it. Like I felt gritty. Like I'd have a hat on, my blue collar shirt. Like man, we're going to work, and it was such a better mindset for me than getting all dressed up to the nines to get on a freaking plane. Like it just felt so stupid. And anyway, like there's little things like that I think head coaches that can do. And I know it may not seem like much, but it really does, I think, go a long way to like the personality of the team or the organization.
For sure.
Well, Alex, I disagree with your point on the teams take the personality of the coach. And this was a big Coach K thing. People always ask me what made Coach K so great. And he, going back to the other point about humility, look, he approached every year with a growth mindset. And he realized, like, look, what worked last year may not work this year. Right. And so his gift and his blessing was his malleability to go into every year, every August, and to understand that, okay, well, I had some seniors that graduated. I have some freshmen I have to incorporate. So like the personality of this team is different, and I have to coach you differently. Right? It's not one size fit all. This is what we do. Now there were certain, non-negotiables every year. Right. But they were very simple. The people think like Duke basketball was like super disciplined, and we had very, very few rules. And on the first day of practice, Coach K says, we have very few rules, guys. Okay. These are the non-negotiables, right? We always look each other in the eye when we talk to each other. Right. We don't make excuses, and we don't lie to each other. Right. That's it. Those are the rules. Those are the rules. Now everything else is negotiable. And we talked about like what are our shared values and how do we want this year to go and yada, yada, yada. But like those were the three constant themes from year to year, because he knew like every team is different. There were teams like when I was a junior, super, super young. So when Carlos Boozer, Mike Dunleavy, Jay Will, Casey Sanders were all freshmen, and we had no upperclassmen besides Chris Carrawell, Nate James, myself, Matty Christensen, J.D. Simpson. So we were super, super young, and he knew he couldn't just like run us through the mixer, right? That same team that came back next year when I was a senior and those guys had been through a year of college basketball, yeah, he coached us way, way, way harder, right? But that was his genius. He understood and was able to change year to year. And, when I think of great coaches, I think of they all have three things. And these are all the Hall of Fame attributes that every Hall of Fame coach I share. And that's integrity, competency, and benevolence. All right. And I think this is true for any great leader. All right. Integrity. Do you say do you do what you say you'll do? Right. And there's no gray area. All right. Coach K said, like, I'm not going to treat each one of you equally, but I will treat you fairly. And he lived by that. Right. And so, the walk on, all right, Andy Borman, my guy, was not treated the same way that Jay Will, two-time All-American was, but they were both treated fairly, and he never deviated. And that just gives you amazing credibility, competency, right? Athletes, I think people in general, are really good at sniffing the bullshit meter, right? They know when something is awry. And so they're always judging a plan or what someone's saying and leadership. I don't know about this dude. I don't know about this lady. I don't know. They may not have the answer, but they know what is probably not going to work, right? And where the competency comes in is like in the highest stressful situation, the player's like, I don't know. When they look over to the coach, they better have a great plan, right? So I think Eric Spoelstra, right? We're down 3-2 to Boston, going to Boston game 6, Eastern Conference Finals. If we lose that game, everyone has a new address next year. They're going to blow up the team, trade everybody. And because Spo had the competency, we knew he knew his shit. All right. And you can talk about everything else about Pat Riley, but Spo did the work. And we all knew when he put something on the board, it was vetted, it was thought about, and we trusted it. He earned that from us because he showed consistent competency and benevolence. Like, look, we're all trying to win, right? And the expression, you catch more bees with honey than vinegar. Shit. Yep. Yeah, honey than shit where I'm from. But are you someone you want to play with? The greatest coach I ever played for in terms of benevolence was Rick Adelman, Hall of Fame coach, played in the league. And I never played for a coach. I never thought this was possible. He gave us ultimate ownership. Whenever we won, it was always who we won. It was, guys, this is your team. What do you want out of this experience? He was leading it, but it was amazing ownership. And so like those three things of integrity, competency, and benevolence, when you have those all come together, man, I'll follow you over a wall. Right. And that's the secret sauce, I think, for leaders and a hallmark of any great Hall of Fame coach.
Yeah. See, I think it's interesting. This is a place where I do think that like things translate a lot in sports and business. Like I don't really think it's that different at all. Like, well, I'll tell you one thing I think is a death knell for a coach or a leader in anywhere, which is being scared. People can tell when you are scared. They can tell when you are nervous, and nervousness is different than fear. But like when your nervousness or fear comes out, and that's where you're coming from a place of that with your team, the team just absolutely is like, I'm not dealing with this. And I think that happens, and it's hard. You think about it for founders. It's hard not to be scared sometimes. This is your whole life. You've asked all your friends and family to come and support you. And so, but like that's true for founders, it's true for investors, it's true for anybody. So I look at I've been lucky too in my world, right? Like I worked for Henry Kravis and George Roberts, Doug Leone, Mike Moritz. Like, these people are fucking real leaders. But one thing about them is like they never seem scared. And even when it's really daunting. And I would think about that a lot when I was, feeling like I was leading. It's like I think that you're thinking about the team more than you're thinking about yourself. That's where I think the lack of being scared shows up, because you're like, it's almost like being a dad. Like I gotta be there for this person, So that's one thing I think that's a huge deal. Is like you cannot let your fear infiltrate the team. You got to be thinking about them. Because no matter whatever you're feeling, they're feeling something worse.
I agree with you, Ravi, real quick. I think they choose not to live in it, though. I think the real leaders recognize it, but they choose to live on the other side.
I don't know this, but I bet you he would call Henry and tell him, because they're first cousins. They've known each other forever. And I bet you there was someone he could talk to about it. But I also believe that he combined it with Alex, some of the stuff you talked about before of like, you know what, F it. If this goes down, it's fine. You know what? Like, we're going to be okay. And I think that those guys, having like started it the way they started it, and you kind of come through what they came through, I think that they they didn't live in the fear. And it's not that it doesn't exist. Everyone gets scared. I was scared when Amazon bought Whole Foods. I was terrified, right? I mean, right? Like, but then you what are you going to do? You're going to stand up in front of 500 people and be like, man, I'm really scared. Like, no, you got to be like, we're going to win, like and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to do it together. And you like turn it into something. So I think that's a big deal. The other thing that I think is a big deal is like, honestly, man, the humility to be able to give credit is so ridiculously valuable to get the best people to come and want to play with you and come and want to be on your team. Like, a fair amount of the reason, or like a huge amount of the reason that I've been ever any good at coaching or leading is because good people like working with me. And that is because they deserve the credit. And I actually think the same thing. I learned that from Henry and George. The reason that they get people to come and be a part of their team is they're always giving credit. Who do you think built the Asia business at KKR? Joe Bay. You ask Henry and George, Joe Bay. Joe Bay's a co-CEO now, but even when he was a young guy, they would be like, oh, Joe Bay did it. Well, I mean, they had something to do with it, right? And then the same thing, like, I think that that's a big deal. They're very humble but they're humble and strategic, of like, this is going to help us. And then the last thing is I do think they like keep the main thing. Like what I mean by that is like one thing Moritz used to say at Sequoia is like, we need to remember that the enemy is outside the building. Okay. Like, hey guys, no matter what's going on here, we're on the same team. We're trying to make great investments. We're not fighting against each other. We're fighting against people outside. And I think like in investment businesses, they fail, and companies, they fail because of internal stuff more so than they fail because of external stuff. There's this saying that more companies die of suicide than homicide. It's not the competitor that does it. It's that they fall apart. The teams fall apart. And I think that the coaches, they keep you focused on an external thing. And then I think that stuff goes a long way. Alex, I will tell you the clothing anecdote you gave, it like gave me goosebumps because I'm thinking of you guys in your blue collar outfits with your names on there, with your hats. And it's like, yeah, man, we're living it. Like, then you feel, Shane talks about this, but like the cohesive team, Shane, like the shared eliteness, wearing the same thing like that blue collar shirt with the name on it. I don't know if it's shared eliteness, but it's like a shared workmanship. Like, yeah, like we're, that's us, that's our culture.
Alex, like I've always been fascinated by like how large football teams are. Okay. And you're a head coach. Okay. And you probably got that job because you're a crack defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, whatever. And all of a sudden you have 53, men who have very, very different skill sets.
And different backgrounds.
Different backgrounds. You have a coaching staff. All right. I don't even know how many coaches are on a staff, like 20, 30. You have trainers, you have support staff, you have you are the CEO of a small company in a very visible industry, and you got to perform. And I'm just fascinated to understand, like, what is that dynamic like? I wouldn't think that the coach knows everybody's name. There's not that many people, but like walk us through like what a head coach thinks about.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I think you hit on it. And 53 guys on the roster, you count, the practice squad now is up to like 20. You got guys on IR. I mean, this is you're right. Like it's a 100-man roster. And when you go travel, the support staff is enormous. I mean, the coaching staff, the training staff, the equipment staff, right? Like it's a little mobile city when we go take over a hotel, and like it's a big production. It's a lot of operations. And I think the head coach, again, they have sole control over a lot of this stuff, right? Like the scheduling, the travel, like all these little decisions that, again, a coordinator's never had to make, that a head coach gets inundated with, right? And a lot of them, again, I think have very little to do with actual like game day winning and losing. And I think that's one of the great jobs of the head coach and or any leader, I think, is eliminating distractions. Right, for his team, for his unit, like, and I think it is, Ravi, you said it, keep the main thing, like that's it. And you do that as a head coach or leader, I think, through your actions most of all, right? Like your actions illustrate priority, right? Like to the team more than your words, right? Like that's what it's about. And I think the one thing that I think all of them have to have that we haven't like touched on, and you're totally right, and like, of course, like you could be the best leader in the world, and if you're not competent at your job, like of course, like you don't have a chance. Like that's just baseline, like you have to like know your stuff. But I think within that, there has to be a level of obsession. I think that all great leaders have, and all head coaches have. Like you can't dabble in this. Like this is something that, on a personal level, most of these people are probably a little out of whack. And the reality is a lot of out of whack. Like. Again, like they're just obsessed with what they do. They are obsessed with the challenge of it. Like I know this for a fact. Like Andy Reid wins a Super Bowl. Like he turns on the game tape. Like all he sees are the 10 plays that went wrong and that he screwed up. right? Like that's all he sees. He doesn't know any other way. Like, and it's just this daily pursuit, and he'll never get to where he wants to go. But like, that's just, he likes that lifestyle, right? It's an obsession for him. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, he would tell us this. Like, this was his life plan since he was a kid. Play football for as long as he could, then coach football for as long as he could, and then die. That was his life plan. Okay? That's his life plan. I mean, this guy, when the Chargers hired him, he drove his RV out and he lived in an RV like next to the facility. Right? Like that's like, he just is, it's different. And I do mean, and I think that difference, you need to be an outlier. And the blue collar was an example of that. And I only use that because like everybody wears suits and you just do it because it's like, well, everybody does it. So every head coach that gets hired, like, well, the rest of the league's doing this, so I guess we better do it. Meanwhile, it has absolutely nothing to do with football, right? Like, so it was, again, it's such a little thing. And like, I love now, right? Like every team does this. They all have social media. So they all take the shots of the team traveling, right? And like, guys love to get all dressed up and you see them taking their shots. They know the camera's on them as they're walking out on the tarmac. Like, and I'm like, what the hell are we doing? Like, this guy's like, this guy's a 350-pound D tackle. Like, but like, I don't know. It just is so funny to me. And the little thing with the shirts, like, you should have seen guys' faces, man, when you put on that blue shirt and you go walk the tarmac. Like, you're not a model. No, you're like, you got game face on, man. You're ready to roll. Like, I'm
a brand, baby. I'm a brand.
Yeah,
like, a brands now.
And that's like, Jim, like, I don't want businessmen. I want football players. Like, that's not why we're here. Like, you keep that stuff outside. Like, like that's not, and certainly it's a reality, but I think you fight it, as a head coach. But I to come back, I just think there is a level of obsession that all these guys have to have. And again, like, I think that can have a negative term, but it really shouldn't. Like, you need to have it. If I'm a GM and I'm looking for a head coach, I want the guy that like, this means more to him than anything else.
What would you interview for, Alex? Okay, let's make it real. You're a GM, okay? Knowing everything you know. And I get that like it's not well understood, but you just went through a good set of stuff. It's not the X's and O's, not the coordinator. It's obsession. What are you doing if you're a GM and you're trying to interview for a head coach? What's your spec other than obsession?
There has to be a plan, right? And so Shane said it, like whether or not, again, like I just find this really interesting. Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, and Urban Meyer were never an offensive coordinator. None of them were offensive coordinators ever. And hands down,
they all call plays as head coaches, though.
Andy does. No, and Jim and Urban definitely not. But he knows his stuff. But those guys definitely, like Andy, like on the defensive side, has absolutely nothing. He doesn't want any part of that. But he can identify good defensive coordinators, and he can manage the staff, right? Like there's different ways to do it. And I think still knows what he wants his defense to look like from an identity standpoint, right? As a head coach. I mean, I think the characteristics he wants them to have, not getting into the minutia of it. So the plan is important, right? I think like that, and that would be like the idea, right, Ravi? Like, and that, like you gotta, or the market. But then again, I do think it's a little deeper than that, right? And I don't know how you get to that in an interview. I've never done that, but like, how do you get to like, what's it about? Like Jim, again, to go back to him, like his childhood greatly affected who he is. He's the son of a coach. He moved around his entire life, like all these college towns. He like it's all he's ever known, right? And I do think that's at the core of he is. And so, like, how do you get to that in an interview?
Well, it's just so funny you asked this. So, and Shane, we got to hear on your stuff because Doug Leone is the best interviewer I've ever seen in my life. Okay. Doug Leone ran Sequoia for a long time. Best interviewer I've ever seen in my life. And Mike Moritz right there with him also ran Sequoia. Same thing those guys do. Those guys go with the beginning. They're asking you about your childhood. When, the first time I interviewed with Mike Moritz, he was on the board of Instacart. When I interviewed with him, he asked me 10 minutes of, are you smart questions? Minute 11, what's your relationship like with your parents? And I was like, what? I mean, I've been interviewed a bunch of times, never, not once. And then an hour and a half of like, from the beginning, what do you think of your brother? What is something you haven't told other people that you think about that? And all of a sudden I started saying things I never said before. I'd never been to therapy, right? So all of a sudden I'm saying things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I knew that. I didn't even know I thought that, and I realized how big of a role my brother played. My brother's 3 years older than me and was perfect growing up. Perfect, right? And always was compared to him. Always worse than him. Even on things like my brother's like much better looking than I am. Like just everything he was better at. And everybody liked him better.
But for the record, he is much better. He's way better looking.
Way better looking. That's what I'm saying. Which is like almost to the point where people kind of look at us and they're like, I know you guys are brothers, but like, man, like he really got all the good features. Like just like it's so clear. So anyway, but like in that conversation with Mike, I actually realized how big of an influence my brother has played. Of just like being nasty competitive for me comes a lot from like being the little brother. And like always having somebody who everyone liked better. And I'm like, man, I gotta do something about this. But my point is going back to like, how do they do it? Alex, I literally asked Mike and Doug this one time. I said, do you guys think that you can go so deep on people's early life because you're older, because you're successful, because people see you? For Moritz, he's a knight, like Sir Michael Moritz, and he's former journalist. And they both were like, absolutely not. People like talking about themselves, right? And people just don't ask. So Moritz thinks that everything that really shapes you, for real shapes you, like in terms of the inner motivation, happens before you're 14 years old. Now, whether or not that's true, it's a pretty interesting theory. And Doug gets to your soul in an interview. So I would tell you, and this is not in long interviews, like in an hour, they can do it. And so I actually think it's just that people ask the wrong questions in interviews rather than, what actually matters.
It sounds like they understand the power of considering the individual, right?
100%. They also understand the value of enduring motivation. And really what they understand, Shane, is, and this is what you taught me about Coach K, they understand people. They realize that at the end of the day, it is about people. And you have to go and get that.
What's the better predictor of success then? Like I totally agree with you. But like when we say people, like, is it talent or is it like determination, motivation, like resiliency, like I think when we're talking about this, like talent's the baseline, right? Like for all these things we're talking about, like levels of leadership, to be able to go play, to be a part of a good company. But like the differentiator to me is like those things you're talking about. It is the determination. Like what motivates you, right? Like, are you obsessed? Like, like how far are you willing to go? And that's what you're looking for. Again, like I'm a GM. That's what I'm trying to find out now.
Look, you need some talent now. All right. As much as, my daughter who is, 5'7" wants to dunk. All right. She ain't dunking. As much heart as she has and conviction and belief that I am going to dunk the basketball, probably not going to happen for her, right? So there is a baseline of raw materials that you have to
minimum viable, talent.
Competency.
Yeah. But Shane, you were saying about Coach K, I think, or maybe you weren't. I thought you were saying.
Well, yeah, it has sounded so much like my time with Coach K. And to your point, Alex, Coach K was obsessed about Duke basketball. He had zero interest. He didn't play golf. He used to play tennis back in the day, but he retired from that. He gardened and he coached Duke basketball to the point where, like, I was in the league. He had no idea what I was doing outside the NBA finals because he was so focused on NBA basketball or Duke basketball. But his obsession with knowing his people is what set him apart. And the energy and the time it takes to think and spend energy trying to optimize your people is a sacrifice and a pain that most leaders aren't willing to go through. And I'm reminded of this when I was a junior. We had just lost the national championship to UConn. All right, great UConn team. They beat us, and it was that summer was the first year Duke ever lost players to the draft that were early entrants. My roommate Elton Brand was the first pick in the draft. He was a sophomore. My other roommate William Avery, sophomore, was like the 14th pick. Corey McGetty, who was a freshman, was the 13th pick. Trajan Langdon, our senior guard, All-American, had graduated. So all that was left in the cupboard were 3 holdovers, Chris Carrawell, Nate James, Shane Battier, and a bunch of freshmen named Mike Dunleavy and Jason Williams, Carlos Boozer. So all the Duke haters came out and said, Duke is dead. You're going to replace Elton Brand with Shane Battier? You kidding me? The charge guy who dives for loose balls and takes my no way. No way. You're not replacing Elton Brand with Battier. No way. So I think Coach K even knew I had a little trepidation, and I was excited. I was happy. Like, Elton, go to the league, man. You're going to be great. Will, go. Because I knew I was going to get more shots next year or whatever. But I was a little scared. Like, it was my time. I didn't know if I was that guy and if I could do it. And so I was interning in Chicago that summer, and Coach K called me out of the blue one day, and he said, "Shane, how's the summer going? Going well, Coach. I got a question for you. On the way to work today, did you say, I'm going to be the best player in the ACC, and I'm going to average 20 a game and lead us back to the ACC championship and win it?" And I sort of laugh. I'm like, well, Coach, click. Coach K hangs up on me. Thought it was kind of weird, but next day he calls back around the same time, says, "Sorry about that, Shane, but I have a very, very serious question for you. Did you wake up today and look in the mirror and say, Shane, I'm going to be, first team All-American, lead us back, number 1 seed, lead us back to the Final Four next year?" And I sort of laugh. I'm like, Coach, click. Coach K hangs up on me again. So the third day, finally wise up, calls back same time, says, "Shane, sorry about that, but I have a very serious question for you. Did you come to the office today, say to yourself, I'm going to be the national player of the year next year, lead us back to the championship and finish the job and win the national championship?" And before he can finish the sentence, I said, "Coach, yes, absolutely. I'm your man. You can count on me." And he said, "Look, son, like, for us to be that team, you have to be that player. And you can't be that player until you believe that you're that player." And like, man, I had never, ever, ever, ever had anyone ever talk to me, challenge me, and believe in me like that at the same time. And that single conversation was like a turning point in my entire career, where I thought I could be pretty good. But from that moment on, I thought of myself as that dude. And wouldn't you know it, 2 years later, I'm the national player of the year, lead my team to a number 1 seed, go to the Final Four, and win the national championship in 2001. Right. And so he only said that because he thought and thought and thought about what I needed. And I didn't need to be, kicked in the pants and challenged for my manhood. He needed to plant in my mind the belief that I could do it and have that bar set for me. And I had teammates that needed a kick in the pants every day. They got a kick in the pants every day. Right? That wasn't what I needed. And that only comes with just obsession about your people and thinking about exactly what they need when they need it every single time. And it was, that moment, those series of phone calls changed my life.
The way I'd put it then on the obsession with people catering to the individual, you have to be able to play different notes as a coach, right? You can't just hit the same one over and over again. And like you just said, I was just thinking about like people I've ever observed. And there are some people like Coach K in that situation, Shane, if you were someone who thought he was going to be the number 1 pick, but wasn't earning it through your work, he wouldn't have called you and said that, "Do you think you can be the number?" He would have called you with something else, right?
Hell no.
And he would have done something else because of that. And I think that that's actually, it's interesting. Like, one of the things that, in my job, I work with like 15 companies at a time, right? Like 10, 15 companies where I'm like on the board or involved in some way, and then maybe some tail of them. But I mean, there are the early 20s founders who have a certain level of confidence. And then there are mid 40s founders who have a very different level of confidence. And actually the way you interact with them is super different. There are some that need to be told, like, you don't know how good you are. You are so good. And we are in this for you. Like, oh my gosh, take us. And there's others that are sort of like, you don't understand how hard it is out there, right? You think we're good. We're not, And my point is like, it is a super different, thing. And one of the things that's like fun about the job that I get to do is like actually having to kind of tailor the message accordingly and figuring out what somebody might need in order to achieve that. And you guys laugh, but like, it's so true, right? Like I find myself some of the times it's like, the public markets guys, they are way different than you think, right? And like, they are crazy and like, we ain't there. And then there's other people truly, I'm like, what are you worried about? There's nobody as good as you. Just go play. Let's go. And but you get the full spectrum. And I think all coaches they have that. Like I look at even on the Duke team that you were on, like he's got to tell Jay Will different stuff that he's telling you, different stuff than he's telling Elton Brand.
100%. And, look, we take coaching for granted. We've been around literally some of the greatest coaches in all of our industry, right? Most people go through life and they don't have one Hall of Fame coach, right? So what do we tell to those folks? What do we tell folks who have never been exposed to the people who have been on the Mount Rushmore, literally of their industries?
The one thing that comes to mind for me too, with all these people we're talking about, is they're all. I agree that they're all different, right? Like they're all outliers, and I do think there's something on that note, Shane. Like, and it's okay to embrace being different. So often, I don't think that that's encouraged, right? Like as we grow up, or like again, I mean, I just think everything's set up to like for us to, you're pursuing what everybody else is doing, or you're trying to be like everybody else, and like I just think that couldn't be further from what you actually should be.
Just as an aside, Alex, on this, and then Shane, I want to go back to what you said about like how do we do it if you haven't been around these Hall of Famers, on the point of like being different or being weird. You guys know my kids homeschool, right? And part of what we do in the homeschool is we try to have like friends come and do an hour with them. Shane's done it. Alex, you're on the docket for next school year when it starts, FYI. And the kids just come up with questions and they ask the person the questions, and the only thing I ask of the person is like, look, just be honest, whatever it is. And so I had Patrick Collison from Stripe. Okay. And one of the things he wrote when he was younger, and our kids found it because they did some research, was like, it's good to be weird as a teenager. Good to be a little weird as a teenager. Okay. So they asked him, like, why? Why is it good to be a little weird as a teenager? And he basically made the same point you just made, which is like there is this extreme power, extreme forces trying to get you to conform, right? And you can basically lose all the things that make you unique by trying to be like everybody else, when in fact, when you grow older, you're going to really love the fact that you have some stuff that's different. And that's going to be what's going to make your friends like you, or make your partner like you, or it's going to make a business person be interested in you. But like that's actually the good stuff. And so now what will happen is, remember, my kids are kids, right? They're 11, 10. Every once in a while, somebody, hey, you whatever, you weirdo. And now every time they'll be like, well, Patrick Collison says it's good to be weird. And I was like, how good is that? Like that is like part of like, the base response for the children. And so I told Patrick that, but I was just thinking about what you said of like, Shane, you talked about this, like when you were a kid, like, so all you want is to be the same, right? And then you get older and you're like, oh man, no, I like being different. And I think that's totally true on the coaches, that like they embrace that.
Yeah. And I think they make it okay for their players to embrace it. Like for me, again, like I just come back to when I got drafted, like I had played my entire college career in the shotgun, entire college career. And in a quote unquote gimmicky spread option type offense that would never work in the NFL. And I got drafted, and all of a sudden there was this huge stigma for me. And I did that. Like I have to be a quote unquote pro style quarterback. I need to be able to play under center with a fullback and run a pro offense, whatever that is. But like I very much felt like I had to be someone other than me, right? Like I need to be Peyton Manning. Like that's like, I got to be this pro quarterback. Like that's it. And I spent a lot of years trying to combat that narrative that was out there, like that I could do this. A lot of years. And again, like, to be honest, I remember like when we hired Jim, like this, like he came in and he's like, you were a great runner in college. Like we're running you.
Yeah.
Like that's like, he's like, you need to like,
yeah.
And it's like, what are we doing? Like, why aren't we running you? Like you have got, like you can do this. It's a strength of yours. And we're going to design plays and call them. And all of a sudden I remember like, it was like a little bit of a light bulb going on that like, okay, it had been something that I had been hesitant to do because I didn't want that. I was trying to combat that narrative, like that I was a runner. Like I need to be this pocket passer. And all of a sudden he's calling plays for me on 3rd and 3 to go run and get a first down with my legs. And like, again, taking pride in that again. And like, and it really, Andy took it to another level too. When I got traded to Kansas City, and it wasn't until I finally kind of embraced this, I think, that I found success in the NFL, was that like, I was finally comfortable like being me, right? Like that my style and is good enough, and that I'm going to just pursue that, right? Being my best and not trying to be somebody else or like anybody else. But it took a lot of like a long time for me to realize that, because of those pressures. And I was adult, like I wasn't a kid, like I was a young man.
But
at
Alex,
that point.
I think one of the things that's there, and I do this. I don't know if Shane does this. I think you probably do it just because like everyone I think does it. But like we tend to think the things we're good at are kind of throwaway or not as good as not as important as the things that other people are good at. You know what I'm saying? And so like on you were like, oh yeah, well the fact that I can run, like that's not important, right? Like I need to be able to do this other thing. And like whatever I'm good at, I tend to be like, oh yeah, but that's not the thing that counts, right? And then it's so stupid because other people look at that like, fuck, I would do anything to be able to run as a quarterback, right? Or whatever my positive, or whatever Shane's positive is. And I think that like one of the big things I think is like not dismissing the stuff that you're actually good at, and just kind of like letting that go to the side. Be like, no, like I gotta be the best version of that, And I think some of the things that Harbaugh did and what coaches do in general. And it's funny, actually, now that I think about it, people have done this for me. Like from one of my insecurities, I think I told you, is people sometimes say, oh, you're good with people. And I oftentimes hear that as like, you're saying I'm bad at math. And I'm like, listen, motherfucker, I'm good at math. Like, like rather than like taking a compliment of actually like, oh no, people like being around you. But I go back and it's sort of like, actually Doug, again, to his credit, was sort of like, why would you fight that? That like people want to be around you. That's a great thing in our business. Right? Like go use it. And I think that like, instead of dismissing it, I think that's like one of the things that really good coaches do is they like get you to like your strengths a little bit,
Bring your bag. Bring
your
bag.
Yeah.
Like great coaches, bring your bag, bring your talent. All right. We'll work with you. Don't worry about your weaknesses. What do we have here? Right. And it's an amazing talent as a coach because it's hard. It's hard. It's scary. It's really scary to embrace, everybody's bag and not just be selective of, let's just take this out of this person, this out of that person, And I play for one of my favorite coaches of all time was Jeff Van Gundy, one of the smartest basketball minds that I've been around. And he had a great saying about the plan he had for us, right? And it's something I tell people all the time to use with their own teams. He said, don't fail the plan, let the plan fail you. Right? And what he meant by that is he had a game plan. And this is, at the beginning of the analytics revolution. And we had the data that like the long 2 points, 20-foot jump shot was the hardest shot to make in basketball, right? Before everyone else knew that was a horrible shot. And he said that we will not lose a game by giving up that shot. Okay. And if a team hits that shot, at a 75, 80% clip and we lose the game, that's on me. Right. So we're going to take away the paint, the drives. We're going to take away the 3-point shot and we're going to give up that 20-foot, hopefully dribble jumper. And if he makes it, it's on me, but don't fail. That's the plan. Don't fail the plan. Okay. The second you go rogue and say, I have a better idea. Okay. And I'm going to do this. And it goes against allowing that 20-foot jumper. Now we got a problem, even if you're successful, right? Don't fail the plan, let the plan fail you. And, as someone who's being coached, that gives you amazing, amazing freedom. That gives you freedom as a player, right? Oh, you're not going to yell at me if I just do what you want me to do, as long as you do it with intensity and thought. And it's an amazing way to liberate the people who are listening to you for leadership.
But Harbaugh also that's so cool because actually, now I think about it, Harbaugh and Andy gave you the kind of the freedom to play free by being like, we want you to run. We want you to be you. They actually let you go back to that. And, I was thinking about your point on bringing your bag, and this is such an aside, but I was thinking about it. My dad is, Shane, you play golf with my dad. Alex, you got to play with him next time he's out here. But my dad's got a funky swing. Okay. Like it is a funky swing. But my dad is like a ninja within like 100 yards, like hooded 7-iron, run it up, like, because he's got amazing hand-eye coordination, right? He never learned how to swing a golf club, but he's like not bad, but he's amazing around the greens because you just kind of like, he's very creative and he can just like put the club on the ball and whatever. He looks crazy sometimes he's doing it, but it's just awesome. And my dad does not care what he doesn't care about anything. He's like, look, I'm coming to the course. I'm bringing my bag, right? I'm going like, like my brother will hit some beautiful, flop shot. And my dad's like, all right, let me do this. And he'll, spin it around the bunker, but he's just proud of like, this is what I do. And so I was just thinking about this thing of like the pride of bring your bag. And like, the best coach I've ever had by far is my dad, in every way. But like he does that even in golf.
For sure.
Oh, 100%.
And he probably though like didn't try to make you into something. You know what I'm saying? Like not talking about golf here, but like I do think that comes to the other part of this is that both those coaches, Jim and Andy, that had a big effect on me, also didn't like, so the same thing going back to the original point of like the difference between fear and courage. Like when I got coached on a play-by-play basis, right? Like both of those guys, right, are quarterback guys. They coached in the quarterback. They're both just they're head coaches. They're constantly in the quarterback room. They coach the quarterback position. I mean, shoot, Jim played it for 15 years. And every single snap, they stand 10 yards deep right behind the QB. So like, because they want the QB like vision,
like
right?
The vantage point, yeah.
Yeah, like so as a quarterback, you drop back, a 5-7 step drop in the gun, like he's 2 yards behind me, right? Like he's like right there, and both of them just like not moving. And you're doing the play, you're running the play, but in practice, and like so it's just this perfect. You have like immediate feedback, right? Like right then. And both of these guys though coached from a point of like it was always moving forward and getting better.
So one thing, and now I'll go back to Shane's question on how do you do this if you haven't been around these coaches? Because the vast majority of people aren't. And I was actually thinking about, to your point, like all of us have been blessed because all of us actually were very lucky to have dads that were good people who helped us early on too. So like we are like, very lucky. But I was thinking about, I actually think there's obviously like the listen to the podcast, read the books, like study the people. And I do think that like, I don't know, you mentioned James Dyson earlier, right? Like founders is ridiculous. Like David Senra is just so good, right? You can just like go deep on these biographies and listen. But I actually think the real thing in addition to that is you have to show vulnerability and say that you're trying to learn it. Because you know what everyone responds to is an ask for help. If you go and you're like, I'm trying to learn what great leadership is, I don't have it at my company, I admire you from a distance, will you talk to me? At least in the Valley, everyone says yes. It's amazing. There's a lot of bad things about Silicon Valley, but the best part about it is this willingness to help if you ask a question. And I suspect that's true everywhere. I think people like being asked. You just have to go do the research to actually know who's good and who's not. Now, I don't know if that works like that in sports, but in business, I'm shocked, at who you can talk to if you just go ask.
Probably not as open door policy in pro sport. Although there is a lot of recycling of coaches, right? So certainly guys move around and are on different staffs and like take notes and certainly can, I think, take what they like. But I don't know why I just thought of this, but it does make me think that like there was also this part, and I don't know if this happens in the business world, but like this is the Bill Belichick model, right? Like he would hire coaches. He didn't want guys that had experience on other staffs. Right. Like, cause they had learned all these negative ways, right? Like they'd learned the norm, the quote unquote, like they're like everybody else. And so he constantly wanted these clean slates so that it was almost like you were going to school there, like the apprenticeship, right? Like this is again, the Patriot way, and you're going to learn our system. Right. And like how many of those guys that like some of them, like what was Matt Patricia? The guy was like a PhD, right? He didn't have a football background. And like he comes in interns and all of a sudden he's, this phenomenal coordinator and head coach. And
ironically, the antithesis of Belichick is, guess who? Guy who served on his staff, Nick Saban. So Nick Saban would be the opposite. Nick Saban was famous for taking all the coaches that got fired. They may have had a run-in, with the law or just didn't win, but they had an amazing skill set that Saban would say, yeah, well, come to Tuscaloosa. Right, and be a special assistant to the offense. And Saban would just sit and just extract that special talent, right? And rehab the guy would be rehabbed just by the Saban aura. And wouldn't you know that guy usually got hired out, and Saban would bring in the next guy. It happened with Sarkisian, it happened with Lane Kiffin, it happened time and time again. And so And it's ironic that, Saban cut his teeth with
Multiple
Belichick.
paths in Nirvana,
And so the two greatest football coaches of our era, very, very different ways of leadership and really team building and coach tree building.
I love that. And I think that I a little bit maybe getting to the point there, Ravi, like what are some of the takeaways? And like, certainly I think that is one of them, right? Like, again, like there is no one way, right? Like, I mean, there's so many different ways to do this. I think there are some commonalities from characteristic standpoints that we've talked about, right? Like, I do think this whole idea of like, you have to be fearless. You said it, right? Like, you got to be competent and sharp. Like, I think there has to be a level of obsession. And there's so many of these things that I think leaders have, but they are different too. Right?
But you got to connect with your people no matter what. They gotta believe that you care about them,
Yeah. It's like that kind of that statement that I think they're on some level, they're all salesmen, right? Like, you got to be able to get people to buy in.
We're all salesmen.
You got to get people to buy in.
We're all salespeople. So Ravi, how do you do a lot of coaching, all right, for your founders. How do you bolster their leadership capabilities? All right. You're dealing with some very, very sharp intellectual people, may not have the raw leadership skills. What do you do to beef up that muscle for your founders?
Besides have them come into the Gupta school.
That's the highest compliment I can give, man. Putting somebody in front of my kids. Come on. I think the first thing that I try to provide is like the truth. I really believe in the Saban quote of the like average players want to be left alone, good players want to be coached, great players want to be told the truth. So I view like a lot of the roles like, what is the truth? How can I give that to you? Okay. So I'd say the first thing I try to do is I try to tell them whether their team is excellent or not. Their team. Because a lot of times you just don't know. If you're a founder, I mean, you remember, like, this might be the first company you've ever started. It might be the first. Mark Zuckerberg always says this. He's like, Facebook's not just the first company I like started. It's the first company I've ever worked at. Right. So one of the things that I think is valuable sometimes for people is just like, what does great look like? So sometimes you'll just go and have them meet excellent C-level people in other organizations. Not that they're going to recruit, but just to be like, this exists. Sometimes you'll hear founders say stuff like, oh, execs stink. And it's like, no. The execs you've seen stink. Some of them really are terrible, but some of them are great. So one of them, Shane, I try to do is just like, let them see what great looks like so that they can increase the scale of their ambition. I think another thing that I try to do is be available. And what I mean by that is like, it is lonely. And in those moments where they're scared, I do want them to call. And I want them to call me, and I want them to know that it's okay to call, And I want them to know, like, I was never a founder, but I was a, leader. And like, I've been there. I know it. It's okay. It's okay. You can call. So I want to be available, and I want to get that call. But honestly, I want to get it selfishly because I like being reliable, But I think that being somebody that can talk to them when the things are bad and letting them know that's okay. And then the third thing that I want to do is a lot of times, this happened the other day after a board meeting. After the board meeting, I called this founder and I said, the founder said they might want to raise additional money. Okay, cool. And they're like, well, we might want to raise it if we can get it at this price. And, people are like, well, like, I don't know if we're gonna get that price. And, the board, whatever the reactions were. And I called him afterwards and I was like, why do you want to raise? And he gave me like a really good answer as to why he wants to. And he basically made it sound like it was kind of like, is either going to make or break the company. I said, okay, cool. It sounds like you think it's like existential, not for like existing, I guess, but existential for your ability to play to win. He's like, yeah, for sure. And I was like, well, then why do you care about the price so much, right? Because you just said that you need it. And everyone reacted to the price. But the point you were making is that for the company you want to build, you got to go and do this. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. So like, then we got to raise. Like, and it's not a board decision. It's your decision. And you just told me that. So my point to that is for people that are really good, Shane, I try to just hold the mirror up, right? Like, what exactly are you saying? And are your actions consistent with that? I don't know what to do. I just want to do what you think we should do, but I want it to be consistent and accurate. And then there are some CEOs or founders who are just so good and they're so tough on themselves, that a lot of what I want them to just know is like, man, you are good. You are so good. And we're riding with you. So a lot of it is just kind of like letting them know we're riding with them. because I do think that like founders, leaders, like a lot of, they're like the best of us. They really are. They work so hard. They're going after it. And so that's kind of some of the stuff I try to do. But a lot of it's just like being there. And then I'll tell you, there's one company I work with where like, they're amazing. And mostly what I can do is like help them recruit. And I just try to like grab a towel, man. Like, okay, cool. All right, that best. I can't give you that much strategic help. Okay, cool. Who can I help you close? So, it depends on the person.
And Alex, looking back at your career, is there any interaction you wish you would have done differently with a coach? Knowing what you know now, and what would you have done?
So first off, Ravi, as you were telling me that story and you're like, the first thing you said was like telling your founders, like, is their team great or not? And I just was like, reminisce to like Andy, I'm rolling along in Kansas City and clearly he's like, this isn't great. This guy over here, Mahomes is great. We better swap this out. Smart decision.
I will tell you, you are the most, in this case, you are definitely the most humble multi-time Pro Bowl quarterback. And I think you finished 2 or 3 in the MVP race that season. If that's not great, I don't know, man. That's pretty good,
So Shane, you absolutely. So one of the things that it doesn't get talked about in mainstream media in regards to football, especially with quarterbacks, but my experience has definitely backed this up. The difference of playing for an offensive head coach and a defensive head coach is night and day when you're a quarterback, because most of the defensive head coaches are worried about their unit, right? Like the defense, and we're going to play great defense. And in order to play great defense, we need good field position. Our offense doesn't need to turn the ball over, and they need to eat up the clock, right? Like that's very much like the recipe to be a top 5 defense. There's a huge correlation with their offense's ability to run the football. It dictates your ability to be right, because you're just not on the field and the games are shorter. So you limit the possessions by the other team. So every defensive head coach I've been a part of, they want you to run the ball, not turn the ball, like play very conservative, right? Like in essence, and vice versa. Offensive head coaches are like, let's freaking go. We're trying to run the score up and score as many points as possible, many plays as possible. And so like as the kind of the field general of that, like, those are so different walking onto the field, like with those two conflicting mindsets. And I had only really known when I got to the NFL, like I played for Urban. The guy was nuts. It was like, well, do we want to put up 50? We're trying to hang a 50 burger every time we take the field. Right. And then I get drafted, and Mike Nolan, awesome guy. And he was a first time head coach. And I'm the number 1 pick, and I'm quarterback, but like, it was very different. And I for the first time I had never been in this position, and I had to juggle this, right? Like, he's asking me to do something different, right? I need to play team football. I need to help the defense. We weren't very good on that side of the ball my first couple of years. And like, so that what I was getting asked to kind of do it differently. We're going to run the football. We're going to shorten these games a little bit. Most of your pass attempts are going to come on 3rd down now, which sucks, right? Like, you're not going to have a lot of 1st and 2nd down passing. And it just was so hard for me. And that dynamic, we didn't have a lot of success. I mean, we were terrible. I was bad. But those interactions, Shane, like, I look back on, and I was young and naive, and I learned a lot about myself, especially. But yeah, like, I look back on those years, and I could have been a lot better, right? There's definitely things I wish I had a second chance on. With Mike, there was a lot of, I had 7 coordinators in my first 7 years on offense. And so there was a lot of other things, but like, I had a role too, and I probably needed to communicate better. I needed to be more comfortable with who I was. Like, there's things, obviously we've talked about, but yeah, I without a doubt, I wish I could do those things again, but I can't. And so you just kind of try to, obviously move forward with them and take what you can. But yeah, I like a lot of things I wish I could do.
What about you, Shane? Because you had so many good coaches, but I mean, are there things that you wish you would have done differently? Same question you asked Alex.
Yeah, I think I would have taken more time to learn how the sausage is made, right? I mean, when you're, I knew I was playing for, the greatest basketball coach of all time, and Coach K. And so like, I followed along, but never really looked and appreciated what I was going through until many years later. And I'm like, oh, this is again, to your point, Alex, my kids are tired of hearing me say next play and, be like a fist and all these Coach K-isms. And, when you're in it, you're just trying to survive. You're trying to make a name for yourself and you're trying to do the best you can. That so often when you're around great teachers, the unfortunate part is you don't realize it till it's gone and it's over. And you realize that, like, as great as you thought it was going through at the time, it was like 100 times better, right? So that's the biggest regret I have, and it's just playing from my dad. My dad, of all the coaches, probably my greatest coach, because he taught me the power of showing up every day enthusiastic, all right, being the biggest cheerleader for your team, right, being a sportsman, playing to win, hustle. Right? Look good, play good. Like, those are all things that, like, man, those are the hallmarks of my career. And those are things my dad just instilled in every one of my teams that we played in, and were the hallmark of my entire NBA career. Right. And so, that's the hard part about playing for great coaches. You don't know until it's gone.
I take so much from what you guys have said today. Would you guys ever coach, either of you guys?
I have coached. I was the last 4 years. I coached my own son in 7th grade and 8th grade. Ran some basketball, and the last 2 years I was the assistant coach at Ransom Everglades High School in Miami as the assistant varsity coach. And I had an unbelievable time. And I know how hard coaching is, and the patience that it takes, and the thought that it takes, and I try to instill all the lessons that I learned on my journey, and I couldn't. And going through that, I've retired from coaching now that I've moved out of Florida. But I have a greater appreciation for the truly great coaches and the energy and the thought and the patience more than anything else. The patience that it takes to see what people are capable of, and it just watering that seed, fertilizing that seed, and not knowing when it's going to sprout, but it sprouts eventually. I'm an impatient person, and that was the hardest part for me. But again, looking back at it, being able to coach my kid and to try to teach him the lessons that made me successful over the years, it's something I probably got more out of than he did at the time.
Totally. Of
Hopefully,
course yeah,
that'll bloom. But I give major props to any coach out there.
What about you, Alex?
You didn't know that you're looking at the Woodside middle school, I should say, flag football offensive coordinator right here? I mean,
well, I should have.
You better have some good stuff.
I'm offended.
I actually had heard.
You better have some good stuff. You play for some pretty good coaches. You better. I want to see some, like, quads wide, motion.
Yeah. Alex, I'm also a fellow Woodside Elementary School coach, because you might not know this, but if you're homeschooling, you actually are still allowed to play on the sports teams for the school, because that's the district you're in. So I am the Woodside basketball coach for Nyan and Shrey, and hopefully we'll be for Savin next year. So we're shared coaching. But please tell me about this experience.
Big roles. No, and I've enjoyed it, and I think certainly, being a parent, you're on some levels you're a coach, like, especially as they get ready for their stuff. Like, I feel like I even, my middle guy who does, he's doing more musicals than sports these days. It's still, there's still so many things that are transferable, but I guess yes and no. I think, again, to come back to, like, I know it requires such a big commitment, Ravi, especially to coach professionally and at the collegiate level. It is a huge commitment. And right now with my kids' ages, like, I just, what is it? This will be like my 4th year out. Like, playing required that commitment too, right? Like, Shane, like it required you so much sacrifice on the family front, and that now, in a little bit when you were playing, it was a means to an end. And lucky enough to play, a long time. And so now, no, I'm kind of in this zone where I'm not quite there. My kids are at great ages, and I really enjoy, being an Uber driver. But I do think there's something intriguing about here as they get a little older, and maybe I do have more time on my hands. Yeah, I think I love the high school age. I think it's an amazing age. I think the kids are so impressionable. I love the idea of running your own program, right? Being the head coach. And again, all these things we've talked about, like it's your program. And how do you want to make it, right? And what is it? What are the things that are important that you want it to stand for? And I think that someday, I don't know, but that's something that intrigues me.
It's so funny you say that. I could totally see that, dude. It would be so cool. That'd be so awesome, like if you did that. And I think that you'd find it so fulfilling. You have to find the time where it works family wise, but like, yeah, I mean, my experience, which is that we were laughing about, but like, it's my favorite thing in the world being their coach. I like truly, it is one of those things that like Shane, because my kids were so much younger when doing it, like you kind of have like none of the complexity or the other stuff. Like it's just the good stuff when they're 10, 11 years old and you're coaching them, I think. And so same thing, like I got all the parents at the end of the year would come up and thank me for doing it, and I'm like, I should thank you. This is my favorite part of the week, but every week, right? These guys out there. And, Alex, I laugh because, we, Woodside basketball, has 3 rules, right? Just 3 rules. Okay. Number 1, have fun and be a good teammate. Number 2, move the ball on offense. Number 3, we're Wildcats on defense because we're the Woodside Wildcats. And I say it every time, and I'm like, it makes me happy to say that right now, but the same thing, like the kids would always ask it, they would yell it, but yeah, it's my favorite thing. I hope you end up being a high school coach. That would be pretty cool.
We'll see. Maybe one day.
I think a huge part of leadership and coach is inspirational motivation. And, I love to hear the football hype coach talks before the game. So Alex, I'm curious, what is your most memorable inspirational speech? And Ravi, give me the equivalent.
I got two great examples. Jim Harbaugh, the moment, the last words, we would go through full team warm-ups in pads. You get to the stadium on game day, as a quarterback, 3.5 hours, 4 hours before a game. You've been leading up to this game all week. It's just obviously it's such high stakes when you play once a week. And, he brings the team back in. And this is right before you're about to run out and play this game, right? And like the stress and energy is at its highest. And the very last words that Jim Harbaugh would say to the team every single game day, like, and I'll never forget the first time he said it, like, it caught me so off guard. I mean, I use it on my kids. It was just like, play as hard as you can, as fast as you can, for as long as you can, and don't worry. Right? Like the last words he said were, don't worry. Like just go, and it's like those things we talk about. You want your team, you want your kids to play free, right? And hard. Essentially, that's all he was saying to the team. The other thing that I love, the Big Red, Andy Reid, as he's known in the building, the night before the game too is kind of same thing. So like you're at the hotel, everybody stays at the hotel the night before a game, again, to kind of eliminate distractions, and you got all your meetings and you're prepping, and you do position meetings, and then you would do offense and defense and special teams meetings, and then the very last meeting is this team meeting. And again, kind of a lot of times the last words from your coach, your head coach, he's got everybody together. It's the night before the big game. Everybody's, you're amped up, and Andy just is like, he'd have this little note card, and he's up there in his Hawaiian shirt, by the way, always in his Hawaiian shirt the night before a game, would just kind of set the tone. And he'd have a little note card, and, like on the note card, every single time he'd get up there and be like, all right, I got some times for you guys. And he would just go through like the logistics. He'd be like, kickoff, 1:07 p.m. tomorrow. He's like, you guys need to be in the locker room, 11:07, right? Pre-game meal starts this time. And he would go through the logistics, and he said, all right, I'm going to treat you guys to a cheeseburger. And his final words were, I'm going to treat you guys to a cheeseburger. Okay. It was every single time for 5 years. His last words to the team were, I'm going to treat you guys to a cheeseburger, because you'd have team snack right then, right? Like that was the tradition. He'd be breaking you for team snack, and then you'd go to bed. And team snack, 2 things Andy Reid snack always had to have were cheeseburgers and then a ridiculous Haagen-Dazs ice cream bar, like the full Sunday setup. But those were his final words, right? Like, and I say that again, to the best coaches I've played for, like, it wasn't some rah-rah cheesy thing, right? Like, but it was consistent, right? And it kind of embodied for both of them who they were and what they wanted their teams to be about. And again, even your mantra, Ravi, with the basketball team, like, again, like there is some level of consistency, and they weren't making it something it wasn't. It wasn't some cheesy speech, right? Like just, these are the things you need to know. And like, I don't know. I found comfort in both of those as a player.
You know, Shane, you asked me as a joke, but I'm going to answer you anyway. You know why? Okay. Because you play a big part in this. So I have two speeches that have two pump up things that have mattered to me. One was what you sent me after Amazon bought Whole Foods. That was an amazing thing. That like really meant a lot to me. And like the end of you have a chance to become anti-fragile. How lucky are you? So you should know, like for real, like in my life, like that was like top of the list. And then the other one is one that you guys will appreciate. So I was in college, okay? I was a senior, and you know, I was trying to get a job. I wasn't going to get drafted like you guys were. So I was like, I need to get a job. Okay, cool. So I'm applying, and like you kind of need one to like get it going. You know, you got to get one job because then you go to the next one. Oh, I already have an offer, this, that. So I don't have anything in hand. I'm grinding trying to get one. Okay. And so the first job that I got turned down from a couple. I'm like, oh, this is not great. So I'm trying to get one. So I am interviewing with Boston Consulting Group, okay, BCG, and I'm just waiting for this call, okay? And the guy who's running the process, and I'm going to use his name, he's a wonderful guy, but I'm using the name just because it helps with the story. The guy's name is David Hugie, okay? And I am just sitting there. I go through it. I'm ready for the call. I'm just waiting for the call from this guy. And one day goes by, 2 days go by, 3 goes by, no call from David Hugie. And I got my little cell phone, my little flip phone, and I'm just dying. Finally, I call my dad. I'm like, Dad, I don't know if I'm gonna get this job. And if I don't get this job, then I don't know if I get McKinsey. Like, I just don't know if I can get this thing. And he's like, tell me what happened. Tell me about the process. So I go through, I tell him the whole thing. My dad listens, takes like 10-second pause. And he says, son, he'll call. And I feel better, right? Because my dad's like, don't worry, he's going to call. I'm going to get the job. And then not 2 seconds later, and he said, and if he doesn't, fuck him. We'll be fine. And I really feel like that moment was like such an amazing dad moment. And even the word choice of like, we'll be fine. My dad doesn't drop an F-bomb terribly frequently, but the same thing of like, it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, fuck him, we'll be fine. And that's the best one. I think about it all the time because whenever like something is not going, if I'm worried something's not going to happen, I tell that to people, the same thing. And sometimes there's some people in my life, and, you know, again, David Hugie, I haven't talked to this guy in 25 years, but sometimes for people I'm really close to, they've actually heard the name David Hugie. Instead of me saying, fuck him, we'll be fine. If something's like, we're not sure about, I'll be like, listen, man, remember David Hugie. And it's, you know, it works to this day. But yeah, that's the best one from my dad.
Oh, it's great.
This was fun.
I think we got it.
That's a sweet story, Ravi.
Hey.